What's going on, everybody? It's Buddy here. Today we have a Chevy Cobalt with some leaking fuel lines. Let's get right in there and fix it. So right here by this back left tire, this is a spot everybody's talking about they get fuel leaks from. So right here, there was a heat shield. You can see there's a hole right there inside of the fuel line. Now there was a heat shield just like this one here. So what these heat shields do is trap the moisture and trap the salt, and they make everything corrode really quick. But no problem, today I'm going to show you guys the easiest way to fix it. Now what we're going to be using for this job is a tubing bender. We have 4 compression fittings. We have a tubing cutter. We have a pick, or you can use a screwdriver, whatever the case. We're going to be using a little hacksaw for metal, and then our tubing. Now you can either use steel tubing or you can use this nickel copper alloy. This stuff bends a lot easier. It's not that much more expensive. I'm going to put all this stuff in the description below so you guys can grab it on Amazon. Make sure you got the right stuff, the right size tubing, and all the right gear to get to work. So where our area is damaged, we want to keep going off until we find a nice clean spot with no rust. Now just to the right of the area we're going to be working on, we're going to have these clips in here holding all the lines in place. We're going to go ahead and pop these clips off. And once you got those clips out, you can go ahead and pull this all the way out. Now, quick note, you do not need to remove this all the way. All you want to do is just get a little bit of play in those lines. So just remove them enough that you can wiggle them around. So since the lines are so close together, I'm unable to get my line cutter in there. So what I'm going to do to create more room is cut the lines with the metal hacksaw. I'll show you guys exactly what I mean here in a second. Now, if your lines are very rusted, you can actually just snap it with your hands. And also a quick note here, we're messing with gas lines, and gas is flammable, of course. So you want to make sure that your lines don't have any gas in them. If you decide to cut them with the saw, one little spark and you get burned. So be sure to let the lines drip out all the way and give the gas enough time to evaporate out of the lines. So at this point, we're going to be using the line cutters. You can now see why we cut the lines originally with a hacksaw. They were so close together and had no play on them to squeeze our line cutter in there. So what we're going to do now is cut the jagged end off of the line that we made with our hacksaw and make a nice clean cut with our line cutters. If you tried putting the fitting over this jagged part without using the line cutters first, it would definitely leak, so be sure not to skip this step. And as I said before, I will put this line cutter and all the tools I'm using in the description box so you can grab them from Amazon. Now, if you haven't used line cutters, the key is to lightly tighten and turn, lightly tighten and turn. You do not want to torque down on these lines. The key is to keep them round. So take your time and just tighten it lightly. So now that we got 2 nice clean cuts right here, instead of just cutting out this little bit of rust, I'm actually going to go all the way up to behind this other heat shield because you can see it's rusting back here. So I'm going to go right to the left of that where the lines are nice and clean. So zooming on a little over here, we're going to take our pick or we're going to take our screwdriver and we're going to pry these lines out of this little bracket. Now we're going to cut away this heat shield with a razor just to give our lines a little more wiggle room so we can fit our line cutter in between these lines. Now, even after cutting away the heat shield, it still didn't give me enough room to fit my line cutter in there. So what I had to do is cut one of the lines with a hacksaw. And then after that, I was able to get my line cutters in there to cut the second line right here. Now we got one more bracket here that we're going to pop off to make sure we have enough wiggle room to get our line cutters in. So what we're going to do now is we're going to cut it on a not rusty spot and also a straight spot. Because remember, we are going to put couplings on this. So we want to make sure it is a straight spot and we don't put it on a bend. And again, we're going to repeat the process here on the other line, and you definitely want to make sure that you don't do it too close to the bend and you don't do it on a rusted spot. And as you guys can see, I taped this piece that I cut off, and I also taped this piece that I cut off. That way I can bend my new piece to the perfect shape and make sure it fits beautifully. So I'm going to start off by cutting off the end piece of my nickel copper alloy pipe. Now, I do want to note here, when you are cutting this stuff, do not crank down on it. Do it slowly, twist a little bit, and turn. It is a softer metal, so it will bend easier, so take your time. We're going to go ahead and pull these off the line because we will not be using these. All right, guys, so now it's time for the fun part. We're going to bend our line as close as we can to the original line coming out of the car. Now, you do not have to get this absolutely perfect, but you want to get as close as you humanly can. Now, the thing I really like about this nickel copper alloy line is that it bends super easily. If you have worked with steel before, you know that it does not bend easily, but this stuff, you can almost bend it with your fingers. As a matter of fact, you can bend it with your fingers because you're watching me do it now. Now, these little tiny bends, you can do them with your fingers, but any kind of 90-degree bends like the first one we did, you definitely want to make sure sure you do it with the tool, because if you attempt to do that with your fingers, you're more than likely just gonna bend the line and it's gonna be useless and you just wasted 10, 15 bucks. Now, after we got the desired shape, we're gonna go ahead and cut it. And I always give it a couple extra inches. You don't wanna cut it short because you can always cut it again while you're under the vehicle, but you can't put the pipe back on once you cut it. So now we're gonna take our line that we just formed and we're gonna take our little compression fitting, unscrew one side. We're gonna slide that right over the tubing. We're going to take almost this little metal bushing here. We're going to slide this over. We're going to put the other end of the compression fitting on our tubing. And then we're going to screw this down. Make sure you're pressing this way on the compression fitting. And then you screw this in. And it will start to get a little tight. Once it gets tight and you can't hand tighten it anymore, we're going to take some wrenches and we're going to go ahead and crank it down. Now be sure when you are tightening these compression fittings on your line that the compression fitting is all the way pressed in this way. You want the end of the line all the way pressed up into the compression fitting to right here. If it's not, then you're just asking for a leak at that point. Then we're going to do the same procedure here on the other side. We're going to take the nut off of one side. We're going to put the nut on it and then the bushing. And then we're going to hand tighten as much as we can and then crank it down here with the wrench. So going back here under the vehicle, we're going to wipe our old line down that we're going to connect to our new line just to get any loose corrosion off of it. And after we got it nice and wiped down, we're going to go ahead and we're going to slide our nut on there, and then we're going to slide our little metal bushing. We're going to take our new line and we're going to slide it in and line it up here with the line that we just set up. We're going to make sure that it is pressed in all the way. That is very important. Make sure it's pressed in all the way. And then we're going to start by hand tightening our nut on our old line into the compression fitting sitting on our new line. And then we're going to come with our wrenches and we're going to crank it down as much as we can. Now you don't want to over crank it, but you definitely want to crank it enough that it is going to bend that little metal bushing in there, and that's what makes a complete seal so you get no leaks. Then we're going to do the exact same thing here on our other line. We're going to wipe it off, make sure any loose corrosion is wiped away, and then we're going to put our nut on. We're going to put our metal bushing on, and then we're going to tighten it by hand, making sure it's all the way pressed in, and then we're going to tighten it down with a wrench. So an extremely important note here, you want to make sure you are hooking these lines up correctly. One runs to the engine and one runs away from the engine. So just kind of mark them with a Sharpie before you take them apart, just so you don't mix them up. So out of pure curiosity, me and my buddy want to know what would happen if you swap the fuel lines on your car. So my hypothesis here was that it would hit this valve purge canister. This is called a valve purge canister. I honestly thought it would hit this and it might spray out a little bit, or more than likely it was just going to leak out. It would damage it for sure, but it would just leak out. His hypothesis, he's also a car guy, he's a mechanic actually. His hypothesis was that it actually won't do anything. There's a little check valve in there, so he thought it would just stop the fuel altogether. So we decided to hook it up, give it a go. We are doing this so you don't have to. I mean, if you accidentally swap your fuel lines, this is what's going to happen. So we were actually very surprised at the results. So let me play this for you guys real quick, and we'll get right back to the video.
Yeah.
Oh, busted. And I just thought I would share this with you guys because it was really funny. He got soaked with fuel. It was hilarious. The valve purge canister was already busted, so I decided to do this anyways because I figured it would damage it. So let me get right back to here for the video for you guys. We're going to pick right back off here at bending the second line. And we're going to bend it the exact same way that we bent the first line. We still have this old line that we can use as a reference. We're going to go ahead and hook up our compression fittings to both sides of the line that we just formed. We're going to wipe down our second line to make sure all loose corrosion is off of it. Then we're going to fit our nut on there. Then we're going to fit our bushing on there. We're going to fit our new line and make sure it is pressed in nice and tight. And then we're going to tighten it down by hand as hard as we can. And then we're going to crank it down with some wrenches. We're going to repeat the same process here on the other side of the second line. Then we're going to go ahead and snap the lines back into any of the brackets that we took them out of.
And then you want to get in your car and put the key in the ignition. Turn it to one click before it starts. All the lights will pop on. Turn it off. Do that again. Turn it off. What that's going to do, that's going to pressurize your fuel lines to make sure you don't have any leaks. So we're going to go check now. So everything up here looks good. Coming over here. Everything looks beautiful.
And as always, be sure to hit the little thumbs up button here under the video. It really helps me out more than you guys know. And also definitely consider subscribing. I got some pretty cool videos here up on the screen that you guys will probably like. So definitely check my channel out and see if it's something for you. Until then, have a good one, guys.